Hello, we are with our guest, Professor Patricia Roush today. Before I begin my questions, I would like to thank her for accepting our invitation. It's an honor to make an interview with you. My first question is, how did you meet audiology?
Yes, nice to meet you too, and thank you for inviting me. I had a younger brother who had a lot of chronic middle ear problems as a child, and I spent many visits with him and my family going back and forth to audiology and ENT, and that was how I first learned what an audiologist did. And when I went to college, I lived in a college dormitory where there were a group of about 8 or 9 deaf students who were enrolled in the university. And at the time, we didn't have computers and that kind of thing. So I became a student note taker for the deaf, and I began to know these deaf students on a personal level. And as I interacted with them, I became very much interested in deafness. And so I took a first introduction to audiology course, became very interested, and then studied deaf education, was not sure if I wanted to do deaf education or special education, but ultimately decided to choose audiology as my career. Yeah.
That's how it happened. My next question is, in your opinion, is only audiology education sufficient to succeed in the field of audiology? If not enough, in which areas should we support ourselves?
Yes, it's a great question. You know, audiology is a relatively young field, and as I'm sure you know, as students of audiology, it covers many different areas, and the usual things we all need to study: anatomy, acoustics, speech science. But in my own career, and I will say as I do this interview, I've been a pediatric audiologist for more than 40 years. So especially, I think, in pediatric audiology, there are many other disciplines that are really important. The field of genetics has grown incredibly, and I think we can learn so much from our genetics colleagues. But as pediatric audiologists, we also need to understand the impact of hearing loss on the family. And I think that looking to our colleagues in the field of psychology and social work are really important, so that we understand how the family and the relationship between the family and the children impact the care that we provide. So I think that's important. I also think it's really important as an audiologist to learn from our colleagues. And so in my career, I've learned tremendously by actually walking down the hall with a patient in clinic and speaking to the ear, nose, and throat specialist. And I have had many very close relationships over the years with ENT physicians, and they've learned from me. I just got an email the other day from a colleague who said, I learned so much from you just by talking. So ENT, pediatrics, our pediatrics colleagues, radiology is really important for audiologists to have some understanding of. Even fields like endocrinology, we have children who have these rare disorders, and we can learn a tremendous amount by talking to our colleagues in these other fields. So I would say, get as much knowledge as you can from all of these different specialists. Yeah.
Thank you. My next question is, what would you advise to audiology students about their careers? What path should they follow in career planning?
Uh-huh. I think, all of us have been hearing, especially in the last year, about artificial intelligence. And that's not new, it's not new, but it's certainly newer than anything that we have had experience with before. It's not something that's going to go away, and it's something I don't think we should be afraid of. I think we can embrace it in our jobs, but I think there are things that artificial intelligence will help us with that we can't even imagine right now. And so I think it's an opportunity to see how we can apply that and use it, while at the same time, we don't want to be afraid of it, but there are certain things that it won't take the place of, right? We know that it won't take the place of our family counseling. We know that we're going to still have to do behavioral tests with children and so on. I think it's important for professionals to be lifelong learners, that they continue to learn throughout their career, even when you've had excellent training. And sometimes what happens is students will have excellent training, but then when they graduate, they forget that they need to continue. So continuing to read the literature and stay current, to participate in continuing education. We have so much more available to us now with continuing education than we did before in the way of online access to our colleagues throughout the world. But that said, I think one of the things that we've learned through the pandemic is there's a lot of value in our face-to-face interactions with people. And so while I support online education, I also think it's important to interact with colleagues at professional meetings. My husband, Jack, is an audiologist too, and both of us, when we reflect on our long careers, we think about those connections we made with people who ended up being our mentors, that perhaps was a chance meeting at a conference. So I think those things are important. I also think it's important to participate in professional organizations and be, more than just a member, but an active participant, volunteering on committees and trying to take leadership roles if that is something that's right for you at a certain point in your career. And I also think that as our field has grown so much, where we have a much greater need to learn to specialize, to be able to specialize within a subset of our field. When I first started, audiologists were very general, but we didn't have cochlear implants. We didn't have auditory brainstem response, or otoacoustic emissions. And so as the field has grown, I think to find an area that's, to be knowledgeable about all the areas, but to specialize is also important. Yeah.
Thank you. My fourth question is, what are your suggestions for making a difference in the field of audiology?
I think we, of course, need to do a good job with each patient that's in front of us, each patient and in each family. We need to do our very best job. But as you know, if we think globally, there are many individuals with hearing loss who are not being served. And if we're to have an impact and make a difference, we're going to need to become advocates for changes in laws, and that not only improve hearing healthcare for all people, but also to advocate for workforce development. Getting back to the notion of advocacy, in our state, in North Carolina, we began universal newborn hearing screening in 2000. And the only way that happened was through a lot of advocacy by audiologists, pediatricians, and other interested parties. If we had sat back, we never would be where we are today. And it was only through a lot of, meetings and hard work that happened. So I think that, in order to make a difference, you need to be change agents. You need to get in there and see what you can do to affect change in whatever small area within a country or broader on the country level, because children need help, and that's the only way it's going to happen. And then, in terms of workforce development, once we graduate, I think we have a responsibility to make sure that future students are trained well, and so be willing to accept students into our clinics for training. And over the course of my entire career, I think there probably wasn't a single semester when I didn't have a student working with me. So, we need to have mentors, and we need to be willing to have students even at the early stages of their career in our clinics, because as you know, there's more than just learning from a book in this field.
My next question is, could you share your 3 golden rules for life in general?
So, of course, that's the hardest question of all, right? Of course, the main golden rule is of course, do unto others what you would like done unto you, and I think that's an important one. But I guess I'll step out of just the 3 and say a book that I think is really interesting and helpful in thinking about sort of golden rules. I'm not sure if you've heard of the 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. But the 4 agreements are, I think they can be applied to all aspects of our life, but also to our careers. And, the first one is be impeccable with your word, think before you speak. And of course, in our field, we need to not only think before we speak, but we need to be good listeners. And I think that is important in all aspects of life, including with our family and those close around us. I think it's important. Another golden rule that he has is to not take things personally. Sometimes our first reaction is to take things personally, but in fact, if we just step back and try to understand where that other person's coming from, we can be more successful. I think it's really important that we try our best not to make assumptions about other people. In my career, I've had the great opportunity to work with people that were much, much smarter and more highly educated than me, and people who had access to many fewer opportunities than I did. And so I think I've learned a lot from that. And I think, we don't, oftentimes with that person sitting in front of us, we don't know what challenges they're facing that day or that year, or what's come before. And so it's important, I think, that we try as best as we can, as hard as it is, to not be judgmental. And then I'll say, finally, to always try our very best. If we, sometimes whether it's in daily life or in our career, that person sitting in front of us or that particular challenge may seem impossible, and you feel like giving up. But if we know at the end of the day, despite the outcome, we've done our best, then I think we can rest at night. So yeah, just a few things that I thought about. That was a hard question to answer.
It is inspiring to hear all of them. My last question is, what are your expectations from young people in the field of audiology?
Okay. I think importantly, I'm going to come back to that point I made earlier, being a lifelong learner and keeping an open mind to changes. I think not only in audiology, but I think in many fields, people are resistant to change. And I have to say I'm guilty of it too. But I think if we keep an open mind to change, that and not be intimidated by new technologies, we can really advance the field. I've worked with many, many students over the years, and I've most enjoyed working with students who are curious and who think and ask good questions. But more importantly, when they show up in clinic on the first day, I want to see that they have some passion for the work. And so, you can tell as a mentor, as a teacher, which students are interested and those who are just going through the steps. And so, if you don't feel passionate about this work, it may be time to think about another career path. And so I would say passion. I'm nearing the end of my career, as you know. It's been a wonderful career. I have enjoyed so many aspects in all the different places that I've worked. But the newer generation, your generation, has so much more background in the technologies that are going to be important. You've been exposed to software your whole life. You have access and understand social media. And so you have some tools in your toolbox that you that we didn't have, that have come over time and we've had to learn. So personally, I'm very, very optimistic about the next generation and what you have to offer. And I think it's great what you're doing with this project to ask the opinion of others who are around in the field. And I wish you the best.
Thank you so much. That was all my questions. And I want to thank you again for participating to our people contributing to Audiology project. We have been enlightened from your experience and advices.